Hi, this is Mike Young with Noble Warriors. You're about to hear a seminar titled Debt Free Living Lead Your Family Out of Financial Bondage, presented by Randy Rokamp, the Virginia Area Director for Crown Financial Ministries in Richmond, Virginia. This challenge was presented at the Iron Sharpens Iron Men's Conference in Colonial Heights, Virginia on February 19, 2011. My prayer is that this message will encourage you in your walk with Christ and better equip you to lead your family.
All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started then. My name is Randy Rokamp. I'm the Area Director for Crown. I have responsibility for most of Virginia, not all of it, but most of it. I have been with Crown as a field representative now for almost 4 years. But my introduction to Crown was really a God thing. My wife and I we have 5 children. We had been We weren't familiar with Crown. We weren't familiar with Larry Burkett. We weren't familiar with biblical financial principles. We just, mostly started off with my wife, knowing a lot of good sense about how to handle money. And over the years, we both learned that. But as I was getting ready to retire, I was here with a company for 30 years. I was getting ready to retire, and I started thinking about what should I do after that. I knew I didn't want to keep doing what I had a degree in computer science. I was an information services person, and I knew I didn't want to consult in that or some of the other things I had learned, but I really felt like I wanted to do something back for the kingdom. So we decided that because God had blessed us and we had kind of figured out how to manage our way through these financial things that we ran into, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that as we go through the day, I said, okay, well, maybe we can help other people with their finances. So I went to my pastor, and I said, hey, would you be willing to, if you have people in the church need some help, let us talk with them. And he said, sure. So then I went back to my wife, and I said, okay, we have our experience, but we don't have any training, and we don't have any materials, so what are we going to do? So I happened to be driving to work one day on American Family Radio. I heard about a Crown Financial class. And so we signed up for that, and it turned out to be what we call money map coaching, and I'll explain that in a little bit. So we became money map coaches at first, which really was perfect. It really was exactly what we wanted, because that was helping people one-on-one. And we were taught to sit down, across the table from a person or a couple who really needed some help. They were in a lot of financial mess, and they needed some help. They needed to get that organized. They needed to have some suggestions. So that's what we learned. So I actually was looking for Crown. Crown wasn't looking for me, but that was a God thing. And I really feel like God has called me into this ministry. And so we've been involved since August of 2007. And that's when I became an area director for Crown. And so that's kind of my background. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk about, I'm going to use this as a kind of just to get us into a little bit, the Debt Free Living by Larry Burkett. And if you fill out that little form where you can fill in your name and stuff, we're going to have a drawing for an audio version of the book. So there's going to be 2 of these given away. So if you fill that out, if you haven't filled one out at our table, fill one out here, give it to me. We're going to do a drawing for that. But this book gives us several stories. I'm going to cover a few of them, of people who got into debt. And it also talks about how they got out of debt. And then it has a lot of useful information to help people that have debt situations, and some ideas, some direction to help them get out of that. So that's just a little bit about the resource we're going to be using. Let me talk a little bit about the title. The title is obviously based on the book, but then the part about leading your family out of financial bondage. So there's 2 elements there that I want to mention. One is how many in here are going through or have gone through men's fraternity in the quest for authentic manhood? Okay, a couple of you, so you know what I'm talking about. But in there, we got to that point in that study a couple weeks ago where they defined authentic manhood, and what it is it's a man who accepts responsibility, rejects passivity, leads courageously, and expects the greater reward, which is God's reward. And so what I wanted to do is, as Mike Young likes to talk about, challenging men, to challenge you in this area of your life. If you're married, to take the leadership of the finances in your home. And I'm going to mention this several times, because that is, if you take anything away from what I say today, please take that away. Go home and take responsibility for the finances in your house. And where I learned that a long time ago, again, not through Crown, in the late 70s, early 80s, my wife and I got into Amway. And I used to go to the leadership conferences and listen to speakers. And one day one of the speakers said, he was talking about men and how men get on their wives about there's not enough money. And he said to us, hey, you're the provider in the family. You take over the checkbook for a while. You write all the bills. You see where the money's going, see how much money there is. And so I did that. I took it over for several years. And so I knew what our bills were, where the money was going. I knew all that. And so I want to challenge you guys that same way, is take responsibility of it. Because the answer is maybe, and again, and please, as I talk today, I don't know any of you, so I'm not judging any of you. I'm not talking to you specifically. But please, take what I'm saying, to heart a little bit and know that I'm not picking on you. But, go home and take that responsibility on. Figure out, and maybe it's because you're not bringing home enough money. A lot of men come home, they give the paycheck to the wife, and then the month's not over yet, and the wife says, we don't have money for this or that, and the man gets upset with her. Well, maybe it's his fault. So that's one of the reasons I want to challenge you with this. The other part about this title, leading your family out of financial bondage, is it is financial bondage. Debt is financial bondage. We don't like to call it that. We normally when we think about bondage, we think about slavery. Well, in Proverbs 22:7, it says, just as the rich rule the poor, so the borrower is servant to the lender. That's the words of one of the translations. So, and if you don't believe that, just stop making a few payments and find out if you're a slave to the lender or not. So it is true. It's modern day slavery is what it is. And the banks and the financial institutions are lording that over us. The people, to get people in debt, keep them in debt. So they make a lot of money on that. So that's the reason for the title. You also have, the other sheet of paper that you have has several references, resources that Crown has. Many of those things that are on there are free. You can download them for free. You can go to the crown.org site. And I'm going to point out a few more things that are there that you can download for free. But that's just a reference for you to be able to go through that when you get home if you want to check a few things out. We have things on there about an employment handbook. What Crown is trying to come out with a lot of things now that are very, very relevant given the economy that we're in. So you'll find some things in there that are new. So that kind of is the introduction here. And just to highlight the need, we were talking about it before, about how sometimes it's easy to get on a budget, but then it's easy to get off the budget. And this I just printed this off this week. It was on the internet. It says, with consumer credit up sharply, is America re-leveraging? This is a secular article. This didn't come off the Crown website. It says, after 2 years of relative frugality caused by the financial crisis, Americans are again borrowing in a big way. Credit card debt is spiraling upwards. Car loans are fueling big sales in Detroit. And even stock market investors are loading up on debt. According to the Federal Reserve, outstanding consumer revolving debt, which is mainly credit cards, increased from $807.2 billion in November to $826 billion in December. It went up over about $19 billion. It's a 2.5% increase in a single month. Outstanding non-revolving debt, such as auto loans, rose from $1.6 trillion in November to $1.61 trillion. These are trillions. This is, we all hear about the government debt and the budget deficit and the debt. This is consumer debt. This is the people. This isn't the government. These are big numbers. And the last thing it says here is, while consumer spending is great for the economy, is increased borrowing good for the consumer? It is, if it's done prudently, within one's income. But it will lead to only more trouble if new borrowings are being used to fund purchases that can't be easily paid off. So the deal is, what I'm going to try to do today is help you learn how to get out of debt This is my objective today, is help you to learn to get out of debt and then stay out of debt. And that's possible. How many of you think you could do that? All right, good. That's good. Okay. Just a few things about Crown. We are an educational ministry. We don't sell financial products and services. We're not even allowed to recommend, financial broker A or financial broker B or banker A or whatever. We are not allowed to do that with our affiliation with Crown. We don't do that. We will teach God's financial principles about debt, saving, giving, investing, integrity, a lot of things about making and managing money. But we don't sell any products or anything like that financial. So you can relax. I'm not going to come with a sales pitch later on to have you let me manage your whatever. So we're online at crown.org. We have a program called Money Life. It's about 2 minutes long. It's on American Family Radio at 3:30 during the week. We are in 86 countries today. And here's an interesting fact. There are over 2,350 verses in the Bible that deal with money and possessions. 2,350. And, the question is, well, why did God do that? Well, he did that because he knew that money was going to vie for the attention, our attention, over his son. And it does. And what we in Crown try to do is what we're trying to do is teach people how to be a better steward and be more generous, and trust in God instead of the bank account, the 401k, the home, the car, the clothes. Put your trust in God, and work hard and do. But God provides everything, and we're going to talk about that later. So I think I've covered that part. This is our mission. Chuck Bentley is our current CEO. Remember, Larry Burkett and Howard Dayton started Crown in 2000. Chuck Bentley's now the CEO. And what he says about Crown, so you understand who we are, as I've kind of alluded to this, we're here to help people get on a budget, save money, get out of debt, okay? But what we say is if that's all we did, then we failed as a ministry. Because just, there's an article. Here's another article I got this week. This was in the Chesterfield Observer. Good advice for getting control of your debt, okay? If the Chesterfield Observer can, and this is a good article, if they can do that and that can help you, and I can do that and help you, and that's all I'm doing, then we might as well just hang it up. That's not what we're here for. We're here, again, to help you understand what God says about this stuff so that you can become a better steward, which is what he wants us to do. So, so the other part there about hearing what God has to say, and so we all know the verses in Matthew where we have the parable of the talents and the 3 men that were given different amounts, and they were told to steward it, and the master went away and came back. And for the first 2, what did he say? What did he say to the first 2? Well done. If you ask most Christians what they want to hear when they die and go to heaven and they're in front of Jesus, that's what they want to hear. And that's what Crown is here to help you do, is so he can say to you, well done, good and faithful servant. And so what does that mean? I mean, how's he going to say that? Well, there's 2 questions. In the Bible it says there's 2 questions you're going to be asked. One is, what did you do with my son? Right? And what did you do with what I gave you? That's the stewardship part. Because God gives us everything. If you really want to boil this down into some of the scriptural bases for what we teach, is first that God owns everything. Now, I had heard that. You've all heard that. When I first went through Crown, the 10-week study that we have, when I finished it, here was my big aha. My big aha is instead of being a good steward of my things, I was being a good steward of his things. And that is a huge, huge difference. And again, that's what we're here to do, is help you understand that. That is a major shift, because what I do, if I think it's all mine, then what I do with it is based on what I think is going to satisfy me. But if I think it's his, what I'm going to do with it, I'm going to be asking him, is this the right thing to be doing? Because here's the other big key to this is, in church, we always hear about the 10%. Right? Well, God's interested in the 90% too. A spending decision to God or a saving decision or an investing decision is no different than a giving decision because it's all his anyway. It's all his money. So what we in Crown try to do, we certainly teach the tithe, but we want to help people manage the 90% and be faithful stewards of that. So that's just all part of what that hearing Jesus say, well done, good and faithful steward is all about. And again, quickly, and I'll get into this, just Crown has lots of resources. We have biblical financial studies. Do most of you guys, have you, anybody in here that's married been in studies with your wife, biblical studies? Or do you pretty much men and women separate, but some of you in with women, with your wives? Our biblical financial study is the study the man and the wife take, because this is an area where they've got to come to agreement and where the man needs to take the leadership, but they've got to work together on that. So we have these studies. We have live seminars. We have this money map coaching. I mentioned that. That's where my wife and I started, helping individuals. We have workshops that are DVD-driven. We have things for the business and marketplace. One of the other books that Larry Burkett wrote is called Business by the Book. So for small business people, we have a course that teaches them biblical ways to run their business. We have things for children and youth all the way through college. We have a study for people that go on the missions field and want to teach these financial principles on the missions field. And we have the short film learning experience. This is one of them. This is called God Provides. These are like 12 to 21 minutes long. And then they have a study. They're great for small group studies. These deal with heart issues. Like this one is Abraham and Isaac. And on your handout, there's this one where you can go to the website, fill out a form, and you'll be sent an email, and you can watch this 5 times on your PC. But the theme of this one is mine or his. And so that's what Abraham had to deal with Isaac. Was this son his or was it God's? And he, in the end, had to say it's God's, and he had to put that boy on that little altar and get ready to kill him. And so these are hard issues because just to the point we were talking about before about getting out of debt, going back in debt, getting out of debt. If you really want to stay out of debt, you got to deal with the hard issue. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, why that causes problems. So this, and it's all about drawing people closer to Christ, transforming lives, reducing stress in people's marriage. We hear of improved marriages because of this. A lot of positive change happens in these classes. So let's go into the debt-free living a little bit. Some of the stories, and again, I bring these up just to highlight a few points, not to really get into them. They're in the book. You'll hear, if you get that audio, you'll hear it all. But Ben and Naomi, they ran into trouble because of what they didn't know. And so what happened is they got into marriage with little or no knowledge. I have a typo up there. It's supposed to be or instead of. But what happens? This happened to me when I didn't really understand personal finances when I got married. My parents never taught it to me. All I had was a model of my parents. My wife had the model of her parents. That's what happens to all of us in here when we come into this. We're all coming from different places. And then if you add blended families on top of that, it even gets more complicated. But you come into this relationship, and you may or may not know anything about how to handle money. So now, but it's one of the most important things to deal with. And a statistic that is out there is that about 56% of all divorces is over money. 56%. And it's no different in the church than it is outside of the church. So this is a critical issue just for our own families. And God said He created families before He created church. I mean, that's a basic unit of society. So they found themselves overwhelmed with opportunities. He got a job, she got a part-time job. They bought a house way too soon. And then she got pregnant. And now they had more debt. And they ended up having to get, it's not on there, they had to get his father to actually co-sign. I'm going to talk about co-signing later too, but they had to get him to co-sign to help. And then they had to declare bankruptcy. And it was all because of what they didn't know. And so that's why we got to get educated. And it says, the prudent man sees danger and takes refuge, but the simple keep going and suffer for it. So we're here to help you to be prudent. Another couple was Bud and Sandy. Now this is about indulgence. This is where, somebody that is living a little higher on the hog goes. But impulse spending, indulgence, get-rich-quick schemes all have the same source, and that's greed. Men are greedy. People are greedy. How much is enough? How much do I need? And in 1 Timothy 6 through 10, it talks about, how the love of money is the root of all sorts of evil. God does not look on greed very favorably at all. He does not, check it out. Do a word study, that logo software they're selling. It's a great, I have that. I got that several years ago, but do a word study on greed and see what God thinks about greed. It's not pretty. The other problem was Bud didn't include Sandy in decisions involving money. So again, what I want to encourage you guys, if you're married, and I'm going to cover this some more, and I'm going to keep hammering on this one, counsel with your wife about money decisions. It's important, and we'll talk about why later. And steady plotting brings prosperity, but hasty speculation brings poverty. And that's the key takeaway there. And they lost everything too in that relationship. They had to start over. Jackson and Lynn, they have to expect the unexpected. Anything ever unexpected happen in your marriage financially? They got going along. He lost his job. She unexpectedly got pregnant. The child had spina bifida, had some medical issues, very expensive. So all of a sudden they had all kind of medical bills coming in, and he was out without a job. Stuff happens. And I was going to tell you about my story, what happened. My second oldest son, when he was 11 or 12, 13 years old, my wife was trying to homeschool, and he was very rebellious. And we tried to deal with it that way for a while, and then we thought maybe we should have him tested, so they had him tested, and he came back what they call oppositional defiant. I don't know if you know anybody like that, but think about a person who is oppositional and defiant all at the same time. That's the way he was. And we just got to the point where it was getting so detrimental to our family that we ended up sending him to a Christian residential treatment program. And he was there for about 13, 14 months. And during that period of time, I don't know if you know about those kind of things, they're very expensive. So this is back in like late 80s. They were over $100 a day then. So we were spending about over $3,000 a month for 13 or 14 months for him to be in this program. And what God sovereignly did, I never had to borrow a penny to do that. We continued to tithe. We continued to give offerings. My wife went into this she likes yard sales, so she'd go out and she's a genius at some of this stuff. She went out, she'd find things that people were selling that she knew she could turn around and sell for a lot more. Because a lot of people don't know how to price yard sale stuff. And so anyway, she had a little business going there for a while, and that helped. And we rented out, we had a room in our basement, a bedroom. And it was pretty much in a little kitchenette down there. So we rented that out. So God provided through that whole period of time. And so that's what I'm talking about. That was unexpected in our life. And that was part of that preparation that God was putting us through so that we could understand how faithful He is. He is truly faithful. And so that's important for us all to know. So I have a little testimony here of a family that I want you to look at. Let's see. That's not it. Okay. Now I'm going to turn this. This is a little bit loud. I don't want to blow your eardrums out on you.
If you would have taken a snapshot of us early in our marriage, we were like any other typical American family. We were many thousands of dollars in debt, had no savings. We were broke. Headed down a not very good path, financially speaking. But, praise God, He had a different plan for us.
This is the story of Michelle and Trevor Thomas, an average American couple who obeyed God's calling on their lives to get and remain out of debt. Here is their story.
When we were in premarital counseling, I don't think I knew the extent of his debt at that point. I don't think it was until we actually got married that we laid it off, because he was just, he would kind of brush it off.
We married in late January 1998, and we embarked on our honeymoon. While we were there, Michelle took financial stock of things, and it was pretty bleak, and it really made her uncomfortable. And she was so uncomfortable, in fact, she was ready for us to end our honeymoon 2 days early and come home because we were so broke. And so we did. We came home early from our honeymoon, and she was ready right then, to nail down a budget.
So I got us on a really strict budget. All of my income was going toward paying off debt after tithing on it, and his income was, paying the bills.
Michelle ended up paying off her own engagement ring because of the strategy that we were using. Using her income to pay off the debt, living off of mine.
Paying off my own engagement ring was an experience. There was probably a little bit of resentment there. I had hoped that he had been more financially responsible, before we got married. And it was just a little funny deal with first.
To get out of debt, that meant not taking on any more debt.
We couldn't eat out much. We couldn't buy a lot of clothes. We couldn't take long vacations. Had to stay around. We just tried to be as frugal as we could be. We started with the smallest debt first, and paid that one off, and then used what we were paying on that debt to pay on the next one, the next smallest one, and then on and on until we had paid everything off. It took about 13 months, I believe, to pay everything off.
My eyes were really open when I did a Bible study. That's what got to my heart. It was in my head, and I was okay with things, but what really sold me was to see the things that we were doing and backed up by biblical principles, by Scripture. There was another step to our whole future. That was huge. That was the biggest step for us, and it was a calling to live our lives completely debt-free, to never borrow again for anything, for a home, for cars, for anything. This was not my plan at all. I was behind, getting out of debt. I was behind living on a budget, but to never borrow money again was a huge step. It was not in my plans to do things this way for us. I had always envisioned, borrowing for a home, even for future cars. I could not see any way around that. And so, Sunday morning at church, I just felt the call of the Lord on my heart. And I looked at Michelle. I remember looking at Michelle, and I'm like, are you ready to make a commitment to the Lord to live completely debt-free the rest of our life, to never borrow money again?
After heeding the call to remain debt-free and to allow God to provide through his unique ways, the Thomases built their own home over the course of several years, completely debt-free.
There's a peace in our home. There's a peace in our marriage. Our children know it because the Lord drew us to this path, pointed us to this path. We have been blessed. Just applying what He's said in His Word, what He's shown us through prayer and the wisdom of others.
One of the things that we enjoy about being debt-free is that on an average income, Trevor's a teacher, and I can bring in a little bit of money working part-time. We're able to support 9 ministries on a monthly basis, and then other people and organizations as needs arise.
What we've done was a specific calling for us. I believe the Scripture teaches that debt should be, and borrowing should be a rare occurrence, but it's not wrong or sinful, to borrow money. We're certainly not saying that, but this calling for us to do things this way was to be an encouragement, to give others hope.
All right. That's what makes me passionate about what I do. That's what turns me on every morning when I get up, is being able to go out and try to reach people through churches or individually to help them get that way if that's what the way they want to be. That's their choice. But you can tell from that, from just their experience and their countenance and their demeanor, I mean, they're pretty happy. They're pretty much at peace, so that's what I wish for all you guys. So let me talk a little bit about what's at issue here. We all know about icebergs, right? We know there's very little bit on the top. There's a whole bunch underneath, and if you're in a boat called the Titanic, you better watch out. Well, at the top there is what we see is the financial problem. That's what people see. I'm in debt, can't make ends meet, those kind of things. They really view it as a financial problem. And in most cases, it is. It is a financial problem. But what's underneath it is a spiritual issue. And again, that's where the problem is. And if we can get that issue and those issues straight, then the financial problems will take care of themselves in most cases. Okay, not all the time. I mean, there are extenuating circumstances, unexpected things happen. But, and the spiritual issues, if I had to just quickly tell you, what are they? One, again, is knowing that God owns everything. Just turning everything over to God, giving everything to God. In your mind, being willing to say, I'm willing to give it all to you, God. It all came from you. When I came into this earth, I had nothing. When I leave, I'm going away with nothing. Everything in between is what you gave me. So just knowing that God owns everything. The second piece of that is being content. Contentment is not taught very much, in the church or outside the church. It certainly is not taught in secular media. Marketing companies are always after us to spend money. But now I'm not talking about being complacent. Okay, you want to work hard, you want to be diligent, but remembering that promotion comes from God, your money everything comes from God. Being content with what He's given you, because that will keep you in a position where you say, okay, I'm going to manage with what God gave me. And the third element of that is having that focus on eternity. I mean, where we're at, if you look at eternity as a line, say, from that wall over there to that wall over there, I mean, we're like right here. Our whole life is a little dot right here. That's all we are here for. Eternity's forever. And God talks about putting treasure up in heaven where moth doesn't destroy and thieves don't come in and steal. So if we think about doing things on earth that are important to God, again, what did you do with what I gave you? If we manage our resources well, we manage our time and our talent well, we treat people generously. We love our neighbor. That's what He's looking for, and that puts treasure in heaven for us. And I heard a guy talking once about if you're putting your treasure in heaven, and heaven's over there and the past is over here, if I'm putting treasure in heaven, I'm getting closer to my treasure every day, right? But if my treasure is back on the earth, I'm getting further and further away from it all the time. And where am I going to be left? Right? So I'd rather be walking towards my treasure than walking away from it. So there's really a spiritual issue that we're dealing with here. And so now kind of talk a little bit about some of the practical stuff. Okay, all this has been nice, but I want to give you something you can get your teeth into and take home and think about. Crown has something called the money map. It's 7 steps to what we call true financial freedom. Now, we're not talking a prosperity gospel right here or a poverty gospel. We're talking stewardship. And so when we talk about true financial freedom, which is step 7, we're talking, here's the way I define it. It means freedom from the bondage of debts, oppression of others, envy, greed, resentfulness, and the freedom to respond without hesitation to the prompting of the Holy Spirit. In short, to fulfill the purpose for which God has you here on earth. That's what true financial freedom is. And so we're going to cover the first 3 right here. These will teach you how to get out of debt. Everything over here is about saving, investing, paying off your home, everything but your home mortgage. Preparing for the future, your children's education, your retirement, all those kind of things. Starting a business if that's what you want to do. But I'm going to just focus over here on these 3. When you go to that crown.org website, you'll be able to find the money map. You can click on it. You can go into it. You can just put your, create a username and a password. You can go in. You can see all 7 of these destinations. You can interact with them a little bit. So it's all there for you. And this is what it looks like. It's like a real map. It's hard to unfold. It's hard to refold. And it's really messy when it's unfolded. But this is what it looks like when you get there. And again, I'm going to cover the first 3 steps. But on the back of the money map, and this is important, is what we talk about, my life purpose and my life goals. And what we teach people, married people, is when you're starting to work on this together, work on those goals together. Because when you share those goals, those financial goals, the next time you're going to have to make a decision about spending money, and you can't agree on it, or you decide, maybe you do agree on it, but you say, does it match up to our goal? And if it doesn't match up to your goal, you don't want to do it, right? Or either that or you got to change your goal. So that's really more important than the actual steps. Because again, you need to be working on this together with your spouse if you're married. I'm going to talk about single people here in a little bit, give you some ideas too. But so in I guess I got ahead of myself. Destination 1 is what we call emergency savings. It's also where we talk about getting on a spending plan. We call it a spending plan. It's another 2 words for budget. People hate the word budget. They don't like that. They view it as very confining. But a budget is actually very, very freeing, because if you're budgeting and you have money in a category, and we're going to talk about the categories in a little bit, if you have money in that category, you can spend whatever's in that category that month. It does not have to be limiting. And as a matter of fact, then you know that if you do not exceed the amount in that category that month, you're going to be fine at the end of the month, because you're creating a balanced budget is what you're doing. Because if you don't have a balanced budget, you're borrowing money. You're getting in debt. You're not going to get out of debt unless you have a balanced budget. So, and why is it important to have a budget? I'll give you 3 reasons why it's important. First of all, you make fact-based decisions versus emotions. So now, you're walking through Walmart and you're getting over here and there's this Blu-ray DVD or some other, flat screen TV that's, wow, that would really look good in my living room or my den, And you look at the price and you say, hey, it's on sale, and you get out your checkbook and you go, woo, that costs less than what I got in my checkbook. I'm going to buy it. What you don't realize is there's other things you're going to have to pay for in that checkbook by the end of the month, right? So you buy the TV and you come home, and then the end of the month comes and you're borrowing money again. You're going into the credit card, you're doing something. Okay, so it's a fact-based decision. Now what you do is you look in your budget, and what does it say for items like that in your budget? You say, it's not in my budget. I already spent some money. I don't have enough money this month for it. I'm going to have to pass. And it'll keep you out of a lot of trouble. The other thing is you spend using the budget, not the checkbook. Okay, again, so you're not looking at what's the balance in the checkbook. I'm spending against that budget. And the other thing then that a budget teaches you is if you, for some reason, you do have to go over an area in your budget in a month, that means you've got to take something from someplace else in the budget to make up for it. Because again, you do not want to spend more than 100%. That was one of the things my wife and I, from the very beginning, did. We agreed we were never going to spend more than we made. And as a matter of fact, for the first 6 years of our life when we were married, we didn't have children. After about the first year, we just started banking her money, her salary. And we decided to live on mine because we knew someday we'd want a family. And we did not want to raise our style of living up where we depended on her salary. So we said, okay, we're going to save her money, and we're going to use that, get ready for a down payment on a house, furniture we might need, things we might want to spend, or just savings. So we made a conscious decision to save her money, and even then when she started staying home with the children, we never spent more than I made. And that's a key. You just get that in your brain. You can't spend more than you make. So some things that will help you maintain a budget is think yearly. When you're setting up something that's a month-to-month basis, think about things that you pay every 3 months, say, like life insurance or car insurance. Or there's some things that you don't pay every month. So If you set up a budget and you forget about that thing, you're not going to have prepared for it and saved up the money so that when the bill comes in, you have the money to pay for it. Keep it simple, okay? If you want to do it on paper, do it on paper. If you want to do it in Excel, do it in Excel. If you want to use Microsoft money, Crown has something called envelopes. I mean, there's all kind of things out there. Whatever works, okay? Because you don't want to get to where I don't have a budget anymore because I can't keep up with it. It's too hard. It's too technical, or it's just too hard. I don't get it. I can't do it. It's too time consuming. Keep it simple. And here's this other thing. As you look at your budget, you'll find that excess spending may be a hard issue, like I was talking about before. And my wife and I money map coach, and in the very first session when we're working with a couple that needs help, I will sit and tell them, okay, tell them about the process and what's going on. I say to them, there's going to come a time when, my wife's name is Sarah. Sarah and I may make a suggestion to you about how you need to deal with an area of your budget where you're over. There's some issues going on in that area of your budget. And you're going to sit there and you're going to say, they're being mean, they're judging me, they don't like me, they're not happy with the way I'm doing things. That's not the way they do things, And I'll tell them, there's a heart issue. The Bible says, where your treasure is, there's your heart. This is where it is in your finances. If you have an area that you're spending too much money in and you can't stop it, it's a heart issue. Probably. Not in most cases. There's always an exception. They're heart issues. And that's why Crown uses the Bible. Ashley Clayton, who is in the executive committee of the SBC in Nashville, talks about this in seminars. One thing he likes a lot of things about Crown. We have an alliance with the SBC. He says Crown starts with Scripture, it ends with Scripture, and it's replete with Scripture. And why do we do that? Because God's the only one that can change a heart. I can't, you can't, only God can. So if we can get people to understand what God's saying about money and possessions, then you have a chance. But if we just sit here and teach you how to do the things I'm talking to you, on a mechanical basis, a financial behavior basis, you'll do it for a while maybe, but then you'll stop. So that's why we use the Bible. The other thing that happens when you start working on a budget, you will be surprised where your money's going. This happens when we money map coach. It's always kind of funny. You know what's going to happen, but we'll tell them to work on their budget, and we come back for the meeting, and they'll say, do you know how much money I spend at Starbucks? Do you know how much money I spend on lunch? Do you know how much money we spend on going out to eat? And that's okay. It's not judging or being critical. I'm just telling you what happens. A budget will help you figure that out. And you'll be amazed. And the thing that I've learned, people that are serious about wanting to be a good steward, if once they know it, they'll start to do things to change it. They'll change their behavior. They'll go to Starbucks one day a week maybe instead of 5. They may go out to dinner once a week or once a month instead of as much as they've been. Whatever it is, if they're serious about this and becoming a good steward, they'll make the changes. The other thing it says up here is save $1,000 for emergency. And we have methods to help you do that if you say, that will never happen. You don't understand my income and my situation, okay? We have a way we can help you learn how to do that. The reason we put that there is that will break the cycle of borrowing. If you have $1,000 in cash in a savings account, it'll cover 90 to 95% of these emergencies. It's got to get the car inspected. I need 4 new tires. It wasn't in my budget. What am I going to do? Well, you got your $1,000 in emergency savings. You pay cash. You start rebuilding the $1,000 up, but you didn't use that credit card again. So that will help you stay out of using your credit cards. The verse is, the wise man saves for the future, but the foolish man spends whatever he gets. We tell people when you finish this, you'll see on the map these check boxes. When you finish one of those things, you put a check mark on it. When you finish Destination 1, we tell you to celebrate. That doesn't mean go to Ruth's Chris and blow your budget out of the water. Maybe you have a nice night at home, or you send the kids somewhere over to your neighbor and you have a nice evening together and a meal. Something that represents celebration to you that you achieved something, because that's important. You gotta reward yourself. You know, God likes to reward us, so you gotta reward yourself. Okay. The second thing is, now we're going to pay your credit cards off. So you got your budget. You cannot even do this if you don't have a budget. I cannot stress to you how important it is to have a budget, because if you don't have a budget and know where all your money's going, you're not going to know how much money you have to pay those credit cards off with. You're just not going to know. You have got to have a budget. That's why that's in Destination 1, okay? Got to start there. Now, I'm going to tell you how to pay the credit cards off using what we call a snowball method. They mentioned it in that video. I'm going to come back to that, so I'm not forgetting it. I just want to get through these and then get into the actual steps of how you do this stuff. Now, you want to increase your savings to 1 month's living expenses. You do that if you get injured on the job and you need workman's comp. It takes about a month to get that. You just want to build your savings up so you have a cushion. You still got the $1,000. Now you're building up your savings so you can live with 1 month without a paycheck. So that's important.
In addition to the 1 month, or is that
Yeah.
the $1,000's going is being increased?
At first you leave the $1,000, just start building on the $1,000 until you get up to the 1 month, because the next one you're going to see, we're going to tell you to go higher. So just good question. So the question was, they wanted me to repeat the questions for the people that are buying these things. If they buy the session. So the question was, do I add a month's living expenses on top of the $1,000, or is it included in the $1,000? And so my answer again is, start building on the $1,000 till you get to that 1 month, because you're gonna want to go higher than that anyway. Now, how many here think you could actually pay all your credit cards off? You can. You can do it. And if you listen to too much marketing and sales, they'll tell you, they don't care if you think that or not, because they just want you to keep spending. Okay. Now, Destination 3, I'm sorry, before I get there, the rules for credit card usage, okay? Use it only for, so Crown is not saying never use a credit card. My wife and I use credit cards. We use it to get rewards. We get rewards back. We get points. We use them, okay? We pay them off at the end of the month. Second thing, pay your balance off at the end of each month. So we're not saying that, credit cards are bad. We're just saying they've got to be managed, okay? So, and you only use it for your budgeted items. If you're in Walmart and so, here's the latest toy, I want to get it. It's not in my budget. Don't use a credit card for it. Don't buy it unless it's in your budget. So you only use it on budget items. And if you can't do that, cut it up and close the account. I mean, you'll still have to pay it off, but you just won't be able to use it anymore. And that won't, this, a lot of times somebody will ask me, well, how does that affect my FICO score? I don't have time to get into that, but there's ways where you can protect your FICO score and still close these accounts and cut those cards up. So that's a separate deal, but you can do it. So don't use that as I'm not going to do that because it'll mess up my FICO score. So, okay. So Destination 3 is pay off my consumer debt. Okay, so this is your car loan, furniture, student loans, everything but the home mortgage is what we're talking about. Okay, so let me tell you how you do this thing with the car. Okay, you got your car. If you got a car payment, you pay the thing off. Okay. Now, don't do what my friend where I used to work did. As soon as he paid it off, he went out and bought another one, because he said, I'm always going to have a car loan. So I just want to be in the nicest car I can be in. He did every 3 years. Now it's 6 years, but then it was 3 years. Every 3 years he'd buy a new car. Here's what you do. You pay the thing off, and the next month you pay yourself what you were paying on the car. So you put it in the savings account. And the next month you put it in the savings account. The next month you put it in the savings account. You keep driving that car, okay? And you kind of figure out, what does this car really cost me per month or per year to drive, and if all of a sudden that, how sometimes cars get old and they all of a sudden need an engine or a transmission, and now it's I don't think that expense is worth the car anymore. maybe that's the point you say, okay, it's time to get rid of that car and buy another one. Okay, so now, in the meantime, you've been saving up your money, and let's not go for the case where, you know, you can't sell this car. I mean, somebody will buy it, you know, regardless of the state it's in. You know, my son just did that. He had a car that the crankshaft broke, but a mechanic bought it for $500 because he can fix it. He can buy a used engine, put it in the car, either drive it, it was nice other than that, or sell it and make some money. There are people that will buy it, even in that shape. But I'm talking about, you know, you're just getting to the point where you're starting to not feel real comfortable about it. You sell it, anyway. Now what you do, you take that money, the money you saved up, and you go buy a brand new car, right? No. Okay. What you do is you're looking for a car 2.5 to 3.5 years old. So if you look at the price of a new car, it's like up here when you buy it, and it's coming down, right, over time. The value of that car is starting to go up. It's going to hold its value over time. And so that 2.5 to 3.5 year time frame is where you're really optimizing what you're getting. And this is what we do. You know, and we've been married 39 years. I think maybe 3 times in our entire marriage we bought a brand new car. We always buy used cars that are 2.5, 3 years old, 3.5 years old. You can get nice cars. You can drive them 5 or 6 years, you know. And I pay cash for my cars. And so I just keep paying myself, you know, keep driving that car. And then when it's time to get a new one or a different one, I do it. That's how you get out of having a car payment all the time. And you can do that because you were making that car payment anyway. If you don't do what I'm talking about, you're going to take that money and spend it somewhere else. And then you're still going to need another car. Anyway, I'm not trying to pick on you. Okay. That's it. Okay, and then remember I said you're going to increase your savings to 3 months, and that's 3 has an asterisk. That's not a typo. Here's what they tell you. The secular world will tell you this, and this is what we tell you in Crown. Now, okay, here's what I'm going to tell you. You take whatever your annual income is, and you divide it by 10,000. That's the number of months, on average, it's going to take you to find a job making the same amount of money, doing the same kind of thing you were trained to do and were doing in the other job. Now, that was when times were normal. I mean, the way the economy is right now, it's probably going to take longer than that many months. Okay, but that's the number that you should plug in there. So, by way of example, if you're making $50,000 a year, divide that by 10,000, you should have 5 months of living expenses in savings. And that's not for investing. That's if I get laid off, lose my job, it takes me 5 months to find another one, guess what? I don't have to get out the credit cards. I don't have to lose my house. You know, I can keep on going. So that's your goal, is you want to start building that savings up. Okay. Let's talk about reducing consumer debt, common consumer debt. The automobile we talked about, okay, we just talked about that. The home mortgage. Once you get to the point where you've paid off some of this, you know, your credit cards and your other consumer debt, now you can really start making extra payments on your home mortgage and pay that thing off fast, okay? And everybody says, well, what about my income tax write-off? Do you know who teaches us that lie? The banks, not the government. The government likes, I mean, they don't mind, they don't really want us to have the deduction either, but the banks love the interest, right? Think about how much, see, this is compound interest working against you, right? If you buy a home and you have a mortgage for 30 years, the rule of thumb is it's going to cost you about 3 times what you borrow to pay the house off. You get a 15-year mortgage, about 2 times. And it depends a little bit on the interest rate, okay? It could get worse or better. Why do you want to give the bank all that money? I'd rather pay the government a little bit more in tax and have the security of knowing I own my own home. So start paying that thing off. And as a matter of fact, we talk about true financial freedom. Getting your house paid off is a huge piece of having that, so you don't have to make that house payment. Investment debt, borrow only for investments where the investment is the sole collateral. So what does that mean? That means like a car. If you had to borrow on a car, I'm just using that as an example, you know, the car is the collateral, so if you can't make the payment, they're going to repossess the car, but at least they didn't come take your house. You know, if you borrow for an investment and it's not secured, then you can lose a lot. So business debt, only if you have a business, consider that borrowing, only if it's going to give you only if you need to, because if you can stay debt-free, you will have a competitive advantage over your competitors, because you don't have to build the cost of your debt into your product or service, right? So that's why as a businessman you want to stay, not to borrow, and we realize you have to borrow in business, so I'm not saying not to borrow, but I'm just saying think about it. If you can do it without it, you're better off. Co-signing. Never, ever, ever co-sign, because when you co-sign, you're as responsible as the person that you're co-signing for. Now let me tell you what, okay, the Bible says it's poor judgment to co-sign for another's no to become responsible for his debts. Let me tell you why God doesn't like co-signing. It's a relational issue. If I co-sign for you and you can't make the payment, is our relationship going to be hunky-dory? No. And that's why God doesn't want us co-signing. It's bad practice anyway, but he's more interested in us preserving our relationship. So what I say to people, and now children, a lot of times parents will co-sign for a child. Talk about that in a minute too, but if rather than co-sign for Bishop Odom, I'm just going to give him the money. Why not? If I'm a co-sign for him, I might have to give it to him anyway. But I'd rather preserve the relationship. It's a relational issue. People are more important to God than anything else. So protect those relationships. The reason I don't recommend, the Crown doesn't recommend co-signing for our children. When you co-sign for your child, what did you just do? Say that again? You taught them how to get in debt. You said, whoo, debt, that's a good thing. Here you go. Take that car. Take that whatever. You're not teaching them the right thing. Now, I realize sometimes it happens, and I've done it. I had to co-sign with my one son, the second oldest one. He got in trouble too, and when now he's doing well. So that's praise God about that. But when he first had to rent an apartment, I had to co-sign with him. He couldn't get one without that. But he was good. He paid the whole thing. He paid the whole year off, and then I got out. If you co-sign, I got out. I got out of that snare. If you've co-signed with somebody, you can get off that thing after a certain period of time. You go back to the creditor. You say, look, I co-signed for this person. They've been paying for a whole year now. They're good for it. I haven't made any of the payments. I want off. And they'll do it. So you can get out. I mean, there's another verse in there that says, get out. If you've co-signed, get out. Some other question. What about consolidations loans? Should I borrow my 401k? Should I take home equity to meet financial needs? Here's what I say. Here's what Crown says about consolidation loans. Until you get on a budget and you're living within your means, do not consolidate your loans. Here's the deal from the bank or the financial institution. They'll say, oh yeah, take all that, combine it all together. You're going to have a lower monthly payment, right? But it's going to be longer. And the interest rate may be lower, but it's longer. And there's that compound interest working against you again. And guess what happens to people that do that haven't started to discipline themselves? They start spending more. And pretty soon they got this consolidated loan, and then they got other debt. And guess what? Pretty soon they can't do that either. So I think there's a point when it's okay, but you've got to get disciplined. You've got to be on a budget. You've got to have some discipline. Borrowing on your 401k, we like to never recommend that. You should, that's long-term savings. That should be in an emergency only kind of thing. Do everything you can do, but don't start robbing yourself, because that's part of that financial freedom that you need later on. Same thing with a home equity loan to meet financial, and that's the same thing as a consolidation loan. Go out and get a home equity line of credit, start borrowing against that. Why? Get your spending under control. first. Then if there's a need, yeah, okay, we're not, this isn't thou shalt not do these things. These are some guidelines that we try to put out there to help protect you from these things that happen. You're doing good? Okay, here's how you get out of debt. These are the steps. Start praying for strength. In the widow in the Old Testament with Elijah, her husband died. She started praying. Then she sought out the prophet. So immediately start letting your needs be known to God. Start tithing regularly. But Randy, I can't do this right now. How am I going to tithe and do this? Well, what's God say? Here's what God says in Malachi 3:8-10, Pastor. Will a man rob God? Yet you rob me. But you ask, how do you rob me? In tithes and offerings. You are under a curse, the whole nation of you, because you are robbing me. Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this. This is the only place in the Bible where God says it's okay to test him. Never anywhere else. Jesus never jumped off the building, when the devil tested him. See if he'd do that. And see if I do not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out such a blessing that you will not have room enough for it. I'm living proof that you can tithe during bad financial times. I told you that story. God is faithful. Now, if you've never tithed, and I do believe in this. God honors your heart. If you're not tithing now and you need to work into it, tomorrow do you go to 10%? And tithe means 10%, guys. I hear some people sometimes say, well, I tithe. Well, they mean they give. They haven't quite hit the 10% mark yet. So, and I can say that. See, your pastor might not want to say that to you, but I can say that. Tithing is 10%. Okay, so if you're not at 10 yet and you're giving, work your way up. God honors your heart. He knows what you're trying to do. He knows that you're going to get there, or that you want to get there. So just start boosting it, okay? I'll get off of tithing. Accumulate no due debt. Remember we talked about that. Cut that. If you can't stop using that credit card, cut it up. Now you want to keep a 30-day diary. This is where you find out where your money's going. This is the first step of building your budget. If I ask all of you to go home today and build your budget, you could estimate it. You could estimate it. But once you do this, this is where you're going to really start to find out what you're really spending. This is where some of the surprises happen. Add those up. You establish a written monthly budget. I'm going to show you these forms in the next slide. These forms are on crown.org. You go to the tools section at the top. You go to an area that says download. They're PDFs. You can download them for free. So if you want to use those, that's fine. Again, if you want to use Excel spreadsheet, that's fine. But you can get at these forms. And now start building up that savings account to the $1,000. So that's what you want to be doing here. Okay, there's a 30-day diary form. Okay, when you build a budget, and I only have 15 more minutes, so I'm going to have to go a little bit quicker here. I will, okay, and let me tell you something about me as an area director. I do not make any commissions off the sale of any product. So I'm not here trying to sell your product. I'm just trying here to help you. We just came out with this. It's called Creating a Spending Plan. It's 2 hours. It's got the DVD, the book. In 2 hours, a seminar instructor will take you through all the detail of how I have to do this. Is $18, it's $10. So, again, it's not $300,000 or something, but we have these tools available to you. We teach this in our studies, but this is by category. Categories: automobile, food, clothing, entertainment, debt. So each one of those categories, every time you spend money, here's what we tell you to do. Get a little spiral notebook, Every time you spend money, write it down. Where you spent it, what the date was, how much. Every couple days, enter it into this form. And then at the end of the month, you just add up the columns. But don't wait until the end of the month to try to do that. You're making it hard on yourself. Every couple days, once a week, whatever works, just add it up, put it on that form. And then what you're going to do is those totals, you're going to transform onto the monthly income and expense form, another thing you can download at Crown. And that's where you're going to start to see where you put in your income and all your expenses. And in Crown, we have your income, we take out your taxes, we take out your tithe, and what we call that is net disposable income. Everything after your tithe and taxes is net disposable income. That's where that's the money you have left to spend. So that's what's going to, where you're going to be figuring out how much you're spending in each one of these areas. And this is, the form keeps going down. So you see on there like housing, food, entertainment, clothing, savings, medical expenses, miscellaneous things, automobile payments, insurance, debts, your investments, school, child care, all those things. And again, it was never my intention to try to teach you this. I just want you to see the forms and know where you're heading if you want to do this, and that there's forms out there that'll help you do it. Okay, so now let's keep on going, getting out of debt here. The next thing you do is you list your assets, everything you own. And then, and it says on there, determine if you should sell any of those things to help pay off some of your debt. Maybe some things sitting in your garage you don't need anymore, or whatever, or in your house, Maybe you want to sell some of those things to help pay off your debt. You list all your liabilities, everything you own. So now you kind of get in a picture of your net worth. Okay? And now what you do, and I'm going to talk about the debt snowball here, you establish a debt repayment schedule. So like they said on that video, what you're going to do is, and it's on, I'll go down here and show you the form. Here's where you list your assets and liabilities on that form. I'll come back to the words here in a minute. This is the debt list. This form is on crown.org. You're going to list to who you owe it, the contact information, because one thing we teach in Crown is never run away from your creditors, run towards them. If you're going to have a problem, call them up. Tell them, I just lost my job, I had this thing, I had that thing, I want to make my payments, can we talk about maybe modifying my monthly payment or whatever, Don't run away from them and wait for them to start calling you. You call them first. What the payoff date is, the number of repayments, the monthly payment, the date due, and the interest rate. So you list everything on that. And then you sort it by amount, by the payoff. You take the smallest amount first. You got your budget. Remember I said you got to have your budget. So you know how much money you can spend, how much money you can put on this debt. You take the smallest thing first. You take everything else you got in your budget that's left over or that you're going to assign to this, and you pay that thing off. You get rid of it, smallest. And now you can feel good that you're making progress. If you start with the biggest thing, you're going to get discouraged. I can tell you that right now. You'll get discouraged and you'll stop doing this. Start at the bottom. Okay. If you get to a place where the amounts are about the same and one has a higher interest rate, pay the higher interest rate one off first. But don't use highest interest rate as necessarily the thing to do first. Okay, you follow me? You got to look at it a little bit and do what makes sense. But so you pay the littlest one off. Now, whatever you were paying on the littlest one, you don't put that in your budget somewhere else or go spend it. You take it and add it to the next smallest amount and add it onto it. Accelerate paying that off. In Crown, actually, one of the things on there is tools. You'll see they have debt repayment calculators. You can find them other places too, but you can figure out how fast you'll be able to pay these things off using some of those calculators. You pay off the second one, then you pay off the third one. And every time you pay one off, you keep taking that amount you were paying on it, add it to the next highest one and everything below it. You take all those amounts and keep applying it to your debt till you pay these things off. And you heard in that video, they said, what did they say, 13, 14 months? They paid it all off. That's how you do it. We call it a debt snowball because the amount of money you're applying gets bigger and bigger. Every time you pay one of them off, the snowballs are getting bigger and helps knock off the next one. So that's what the debt snowball is. Let me go back up here. So that's the debt repayment. Consider earning additional income. Now, if you can spend less or make additional income, which do you think is better? Spending less, okay? Because every dollar that you spend is a dollar you can put against your debt or into your budget for something else. If you go out and earn additional income, you're going to pay tax on it. You're going to spend your time on it. You know, if it's a second job, you're starting to impact your family if you're married. You know, there's costs associated with doing that. Now, you may have to do that, okay? But the preferred method is always spend less. Next thing would anything you have that you could sell, because that's now immediate money that you can put on that debt to get rid of it. You know, and then look at earning additional income. Be content with what you have. You know, that they've done studies. If you're walking into car dealerships or you're walking into your favorite, and I know Man's here talking about hunting and fishing and all that, but you're going into your favorite sporting goods place looking for the latest, you know, fishing pole or rifle or gun, shotgun or whatever, you're going to be tempted. You know, if those are temptations to spend money for you, don't go there. You know, just stay away. But that's what the world. You know, I heard the statistic. I can't remember exactly, but it's like 50. You'll hear 50 times in a day to spend money. You may hear once in a day to save money. You're just bombarded by marketing agencies wanting you to spend your money. So be content. Remember I said that's one of the three things that's important. It's a spiritual issue. Contentment is a spiritual issue. Considering a radical change in your lifestyle. Sometimes some people have overbought a home. Now I know in this economy, you know, that's a hard thing to do because some people are upside down, the value of their homes come down. But in normal times, you may have to downsize, get a lower house payment, move into an apartment for a while, you know, start paying off those debts. I mean, sometimes you can't keep doing what you're doing and, you know, if you're in debt and expect to get out of debt. You've got to sometimes you have to do some radical things. And don't give up. Whatever you do, don't give up. Okay. I think I have time for this. Well, if I have time, I'll come back. It's about money map coaching. It's about another family that was in big trouble, and they asked for some money map coaching. Crown has volunteers that are trained to sit down with individuals one-on-one. We have classes for normal circumstances, but if somebody's really, really in trouble and needs some help, we have what's called money map coaches, and we can assign those to those people, and they'll help them work their way through, create a budget, give them some ideas about how to get out of that budget and things like that. So here's my friendly advice. So if you're married, work on this together with your wife. Don't leave her out. Don't not do it. You know, take that responsibility to work on your finances together. Seek counsel from your wife. You know, even if your wife, you know, and your wife may be stronger in finances than you are, in the personal finance. I don't know. So I'm speaking in general here, but a lot of times women are more intuitive than men, and sometimes a woman might say, I don't really think we ought to do that financial decision, and she'll have her reasons, and sometimes we men do it anyway, and then we go, I should have listened to her, you know. Even if she's not a subject matter expert of something you're talking about, her intuition and, you know, can save you a lot of grief. So listen to her counsel. And we teach that in Crown. There's one whole week in this 10-week study we have. It's all about counsel. You know, it honors your wife to do that, and it prepares her for the future. So if she helps, you both come to agreement on a decision, and then something bad does happen about it, you're both on the same page, and now you're both going to work your way through it. Whereas if you made the decision and she wasn't with you, then think how bad it's going to be when you try to work through it. Then, right? So get her on the same page. If you're not married, I said I'd talk about this, seek counsel from your parents, even if they're not saved. You know, your parents they've got age that you don't have, you know, so they can help, you know. Now, if you're married, your primary source is your wife, okay, and the Bible and godly advisors. You still may want to talk to your parents, but if you're single, you know, your parents or godly advisors, somebody in the church that, you know, has done well in a certain area. And go get some advice from them. And seek the counsel of the Lord. So here's some final thoughts, and then we have just a few minutes for questions. Okay, I ask you all to fill out that form. If you want to be in the drawing for the audio version of this book, The Debt-Free Living. Make sure you filled out that little slip and give it to me because we're going to do the drawing after this. If you'd like a Money Map coach to assist you, I wasn't going to sit here and ask for a show of hands. Just on that form and ask that question. Just put a check mark by it. We'll call you up and see if we can get you somebody to help. If you want to have me come in and help introduce Crown to your church leadership, check that on the box and I'll get back to you. What I'm going to do with that information, just so you know, one is for the drawing, and two is I have a newsletter that's going to be starting to come out probably in a month or two. I'm going to put you on the email list. You can opt out of it if you don't want it, but I'm just going to use, that's all I'm going to do. If you don't check either of those two boxes, you're not going to hear from me. If you want to call me, that's fine, but I'm not going to harass you or spam you or anything else, okay? And then download the forms. So I think I'm at the end. Yep. Are there any questions? Was this helpful? I always like a little feedback. I mean, was this? Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. And I'll be here. If you have a question you want to ask me, that's fine. And I'll be here for a little while. And then, other than that, I guess we're on a break.
I trust that through this presentation you've been challenged and motivated to take bold steps of faith to advance the kingdom. We are thankful for the help and support we've received on these recordings from Morris Audio Consulting. Visit them on the web at morrisaudioconsulting.com. We also hope you'll take time to learn more about Noble Warriors and the Iron Sharpens Iron Conference Network by visiting noblewarriors.org. God bless you, friend.